Hey everybody, my name is Beacon, the Poi Mechanic, and if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're interested in or maybe have already purchased some of the handles that we make here at Lost and Flow and you're looking for some more information on them. In this video, I'll be giving you all the info you could possibly want to know, including specs, maintenance, how to take the lights in and out, and then if you're a do-it-yourselfer like myself and you bought the handles by themselves, I'll have a complete tutorial to show you how to build them. Now, if you bought these from Flow on Fire, which they're our main seller right now, I really recommend that you have them make you the setup. Whether it's just making you the handle with a leash that you can put on your own heads or building you a complete LED setup, their product is amazing and they do great work, so I really recommend them. Now, if you're wanting to skip ahead to any section that might appeal to you, look in the video description below. I've left timestamps and it'll help you navigate to those sections. So let's get started. Whether you get the Reactor Basic or the Plus, they'll both use the Flow Toys capsule light with the long shell, and the weight I'll be giving on these is with this inside. The Basic, which doesn't use the bearing, weighs 65 grams. It's 102 millimeters long by 35 millimeters wide. The Plus weighs 78 grams with an 8 gram bearing, and you can run it with or without the bearing. It's 118 millimeters long by 37 millimeters wide. There's about an inch difference between the two, and what's currently on the market is about halfway in between these. They both are 3D printed and they are covered in a really nice rubberized grip that is a lot better to grip onto than most 3D printed materials. The bearing is a hybrid ceramic and it's double sealed, so there's a dust cover on both sides, and I play with these in the dirt a lot and I never have issues with them. Keep in mind when you first get them that they're not going to spin as fast as they will once you break them in. And to break them in, I recommend, as always, to do lots of orbitals. Now, it is a 10 millimeter bearing. There's going to be some for 8 millimeter ropes as well, but with the 10 millimeter, you're pretty much limited to that, or 10.3. So if you're expecting to get this to put on a used set of tethers, I think you're probably going to have some problems, especially if you're using a synthetic rope like a VPC here. This stuff just tends to swell right after using it, so it would be really hard to get this bearing off without cutting it, so I'm expecting it to be quite hard to get it on. There are certain ropes like this, which is a dynamic climbing rope that doesn't shrink as much, and I've actually been able to get this on and off quite a bit, although I haven't used this set a tremendous amount, but you might be able to get it on there. Your results may vary though. Now, if you ever need to clean your grip, you can do so using either an isopropyl alcohol or a mild soap and water. Just make sure not to use something that can make your grip tacky, because that can damage it. Also, if you're going to introduce moisture to this, it's wise to take out the chip. Now, don't ever try to peel the grip back, because it is form fit on there and it will stretch it if you try to move it around too much and make it not want to sit on there very well. Also, don't let these stay out in the sun, just because, like most plastic, in a UV reaction will make it kind of yellowed, so don't store them on your dash. As far as the bearing goes, it is sealed on both sides, so there's not too much you could do to that. You could pop the seal off if you ever need to put different oil in it or whatever, but it's do at your own risk. If you do so, you can use like a razor blade or something like that and get underneath this very outside lip, not the inside, and very, very carefully pry it up. If you put too much force on it, it can damage the backside of the seal, which is a metal, so it can deform it. Once you get your oil in there, it should snap back in place. The basic reactor is made up of 3 different parts: the handle, the capsule lock, and the rope sleeve. Both of these have indentations in them that match up with the tabs on the capsule. So when you put this on, look for that and line those up. Stick one side in first, and then I use my palm and then just press that into place. And you might have to twist this to get it aligned. Next, make sure to put the rope through your handle and then the rope through this, and then have the cap on the end of your rope. And you're going to open this up and stick it in there. And then you're going to slide this down into place. Now, sometimes it's a bit hard to get it on there, so once you get it started, make sure your shell is closed for one. And twisting it like that can help. And then twist and push this on. Sometimes it's hard because this wants to bunch up, so hold on to it do that a couple times, and then it should get on there. Now, twist it around and make sure not one side or the other is sticking out too far. If it is, it's going to get hooked up inside there. So twist this a little bit to make sure that it gets aligned with those little indentations. Next, you just slide this up in there, and then it should snap into place like that. To take it out, grab right here with your hand or fingers and then pull out like that. Now, if this ever gets stuck in there for whatever reason, just do a little twist like that and twist this if you can, and then it should pop out. But if for whatever reason you're really having a hard time doing it, take the rope and then kind of bunch it up and then press like that. Not all rope works that way. It's this, a jacket with a core type rope that works good for this. If you have like a polypropylene like this, it is a bit more of a challenge to do that. So if you have to, you can use needle nose pliers and kind of go like that to do it, but you shouldn't ever need to worry about that. So to take this off, I use my hand and twist and then pull, but if you're having a hard time doing that, you can use this and just be careful and just kind of rock it back and forth like that. And pull that off, and then if you need to take this off, you can twist and then pull. The Reactor Plus is made up of 5 different parts: the handle, the capsule lock, the capsule plug, the bearing holder, and the bearing. The bearing holder should already be installed in here and you should never have to worry about it. But if for whatever reason you have to replace this, you can do so, but you have to be really careful and use a pair of needle nose pliers. Be careful not to poke yourself or go through the handle. And what you're going to do is get this underneath this lip right here between that and the bearing holder, and then you're going to basically come around like that and then grip onto it and push down. And if you push down, it will kind of fold it, and then you can pull this out. Same thing with getting it back in, fold it, and then push it back in. But I don't really recommend doing this too often because it's not really made to do that with much frequency. Now let's put this together. Your capsule lock will have 2 little indentations that match up with the tabs on your capsule. Get one side lined up with that, and then use your palm and press it into place. And you might have to twist this just to get it perfectly locked on there. Next is the capsule plug. Now, the hole on this is just a little bit too small to work with this, so you'll have to modify this a little bit by either using a file, a drill bit, or my preferred method is a Dremel if you have it, and get it to about 3/8 inch. We had to make this thicker because this is the main lock that holds this inside of here, and we wanted to make sure that it was strong enough to do so. Take your little O-ring that these come with and fit it over this. There's a little groove right here that this will sit on, and then stick this in here. And you might have to twist this a little bit to get it to close the capsule. And then once that happens, you just take this ring and slide it down like that. Next, take your rope that's already been prepared with either a bearing or a washer and a cap on the end of it. Take the other end and stick it through the back side of your reactor. Now start to pull it down, and before you get down here to the bearing holder, right around here, put your finger on one side like this and then pull like that. And if you did it right, this should have kind of came in at an angle, and that's going to help this get into the bearing holder a little bit easier without it catching up on that lip. So it should look like that. And then this just goes in the back and snaps into place. To pull it out, fingernails underneath there like that, and then pull it out. Now, sometimes this can get a little stuck or whatever, and if that's happening, what I recommend doing is just go like this right quick, or twist this a little bit if you can get a grip on that, and that should free it up enough to pull it out. To take this out, use your rope to bunch up and use force to push it through like that. Now, if you're using a type of rope that is like a polypropylene or something that doesn't work very well on this design, you can do that, but it kind of wants to fold like this. So use a pair of needle nose to start it off with, and then if you can kind of like flatten it out again so it's kind of the bearings at an angle, and then just start working it up, and it should come all the way out the top. And to put this back on, just roll that ring up. Separate that with your fingers if you can, and then the back, sometimes I twist and pop, or you can just pop it off like that. So when it comes to ropes, there's synthetic and natural fibers. I don't recommend any natural fiber ones just because if you're doing orbitals and you make your ropes contact and then you pull like that, it's just going to wear them out a lot quicker. So I recommend synthetics. And when it comes to synthetics, there's a bunch of different choices, and any of them should work as long as you use the right technique to put the cap on the end. Some you'll have to melt like that. Other ones you'll have to put an epoxy cap on or something similar. So when it comes to the different types of ropes, this is called a single braid. This is what you'll find in polypropylene ropes. This is smithy rope, and there's also nylon that looks like this. I don't really like this rope that much, just for my own reasons, but also for if you're using like the egg knob, this slides in and out a little too easy, and it makes it a little hard to get it to bunch up, and it does that. So keep that in mind. This rope right here is a rope that you'd find on the Ultra Poi orbs. I'm not too sure what it's made out of, but it's called a double braid. And what that means is it has a jacket and a core. And if they're two different materials, sometimes they don't melt together very well. This does, though. It melts quite well, and you can do this with a lighter. This is the VPC rope, and it doesn't melt together well because the jacket is polyester and the core is Vectrin, and they have different melting temperatures, so getting them to bond is challenging. I've seen some people make some crude caps, but I definitely don't recommend it if you're doing orbitals and things like that, because you don't want the rope to pull through and cause a poi to go flying. So in this case, I'll use a epoxy. This is a fire resistant rope called Technora, and it is fire resistant, so it doesn't really want to melt at all, so you'll have to use a epoxy on that. This is called a single braid, but it's technically a double braid too, because once you open this up, you can feed the rope through itself and then double it up like I have here. This rope is a climbing rope called dynamic rope. Not all of these are made the same. Some of them have different materials and don't melt very well. This stuff melts all right. You can definitely make a cap on this, but check with whoever you're getting it from to make sure that they recommend you doing it that way or doing it with epoxy. So here comes the fun part. Let's put these things together. All right, so some ropes go through a bearing quite easily. Other ropes do not. If you have a frayed end like that, it's going to be extra hard to get it through there, so you'll want to clean that up. In this case, this one goes in there pretty easy, so what I could do is just melt the ends a little bit together, and then once they all start getting melted a little bit, then just start rolling it against something like metal. Just be careful, hot stuff hurts. Once I get it down there tight enough like that, then this should stick through there pretty easily. Other rope, like if you're using a 7/16 inch rope, I'm thinking if you found something like that in this style, you could get it through here. You'll want to cut it at an angle. And what I would do is use electrical tape. But I always use electrical tape because it gets the fibers really nice and tight for a really clean cut. So with something like that, cut it with a clean, or a fresh, I should say, razor blade, and go at an angle. Like that, and then stick that through there. So this is smithy rope. Smithy rope, nylon, and polypropylene all melt pretty much the same and quite easily. So assuming that you already have a bearing on there, I'm going to show you how to put a cap on that. Now I've cut this flush, and then I've left about a 1/4 inch of tape on there. I'm going to do another round of tape on the bottom here of that, and that's just to keep this from fraying out too much. And now I'm going to take a lighter. You can do this with a torch, but it burns really quick and easy, so I recommend doing this and just taking your time and going around. And you really want to go around, because if you just hold it in one spot, it can char it too quick. If it really starts getting black, like that's getting black, but it's melting, but if it's getting too black and it starts to bubble, that means you're usually getting it just a little bit too hot. So once I get it pretty much to the melting point like that, I'm going to find a flat metal object and then press it like that. And that should leave a cap. Now that cap is pretty crude, so if it's still warm, you can go like that and kind of round it off. And you might have to do this a couple times until you get that cap the best you can. And You also don't want to make this catch on fire, because if it's catching on fire, it means that it's too hot. Now you got to remember, this is going to be sitting next to a bearing, so you want this to be, you know, sitting on this right here, which can be a challenge out of itself. But like if you heat it up and then roll it like this on a flat surface, and then take another flat surface and do that, it should work just fine. So I'm going to try that right quick. Flat surface, and first I'm going to flatten that out a little bit, and then I'm going to roll this against the flat surface, and there you go. That should be good enough to sit on your bearing. If you have a low spot like that, you'll just have to keep working it until you just get it right. You could also set it on a flat surface, and when it's warm, go around it with a pair of pliers or something. Just be careful, because as I said, it's pretty hot stuff. All right, next I'm going to do this orb poi rope from Ultra Poi. And this one is going to be just slightly different because it has the core like that. And in this case, I'm going to cut about a ½ an inch above where this tape is, instead of a ¼ inch like I did before. Like that. And then, as you can see, this core is flush with the outside jacket, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's back in there like that. And if that happens, what you'll do is loosely hold on to this, pinch hard back here, and you're going to bunch the rope up. And then once it bunches up, pinch and then pull, and then try that again. And just keep doing that until you get that flush right there. And then you are ready to take the tape off. The reason I did this so far back is because this has a jacket. The jacket's going to flare out first, and that's fine. If the tape was too close, it wouldn't do that, and this would all melt to itself and not quite create the cap that I'm wanting. So first I'm going to go around the outside, and that does not look very clean right now, but it should soon. Once I go around the outside and it starts melting, then I'll go on the inside and it'll start shrinking into the outside a bit there. And then evenly heat it all up, and then press on it like that. And then roll it. And if you need to, you can light it again and take some kind of a flat object on the back side and smooth that out. So in this case, I'm going to use, let's see, so I use this razor blade. I should have probably used the back side of the razor blade, and just smooth it out as I go around. And there you go. Now, I made this one a little messed up on purpose. If you can see right there, it has a little tab that's sticking down. And if that happens, it can go right into your bearing seal surface. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. You'll feel it. It's not going to feel smooth. So I would take that out again, and then find that spot, and then hold the lighter and hold the rope up. That way the heat's going up and not getting your fibers down here. And just still be careful that you don't get that. Once you heat it up a bit, then you can take it and then flatten it out like that. So also make sure you do a proper stress test. Like even though you think you might have got it perfect, before you start doing anything with it, just pull on this harder than you would pull on an orbital, and make sure that it is not going to go anywhere like that. So what happens if you have a thicker double braid rope that will barely fit on here? You can't just cut the rope and then try to stick it on, because if you have tape on there, then the tape is even too thick. If you cut it at an angle, sometimes you can make that work, but you're still dealing with tape and you're still dealing with the same thickness of rope. The best way I figured out how to do it is take the opposite side of your rope and pull it about a little ways out like that. And then pinch right there, and pinch and roll, or pull your hand up the rope. And if you've done it properly, the core is now down here. Now you can stick this in there. If you can't, now's a good time to just wrap this up extra tight. You can wrap it all the way out to the end, or wrap it extra tight and then cut it. And now this should feed on there like that. That's the core right there. Now I can pull it on. Now, so you don't want to lose the rope that you have. Oh, you know, if you don't have much rope, you want to get that core back up to there. What you'll do is on this end of the bearing, you'll pinch right here and then try to slide the rope up while you're pinching, and then pinch with the opposite hand and let go, and then smooth this out so it's tight again, and then do the same thing and do that a couple times, and eventually the core will come out the top. Okay, so I have a 4.5 foot section of rope here, and I have pretty long tethers to begin with, so I don't have much room to play around with. I could cut the rope in half and do the taper on both sides, but it's kind of a pain, and you lose a little bit of rope each time you do that, and I don't have much to spare. So what I did is I did the taper on one side and fed the bearing all the way down to that side and then put another bearing on. Now, if you are like me and you're going to be doing pod mods and you use these little rings that we have here, these rings actually go inside of a capsule. Whether you're using a short shell or a long shell, they'll kind of snap in there like that. And so this is also an epoxy puck. So if you're doing it that way, I'm going to have my handles here and my pod mods down here. So what I needed to do is put first this bowl-shaped puck with the bowl facing away from the bearing. I put that on first, and then I put the bearing on, and then you need to put another one on, also with the bowl facing away from the bearing, and then repeat the steps down here. So it's going to look like that. And then once you get the epoxy on here, you can cut the rope in the center, and you're not going to have to worry about getting that over a really thick rope that you can't taper anymore. All right, so now I need to cut this flush. But first, I want to do something that's really important. If I try to push this up and it's my mold is up here and it's already set up and everything, and I'm trying to push this, a lot of times this will bunch up. And the way to prevent that is to get it as tight as you can against the core to begin with. So pinch it off right here and then pull on this and get everything nice and tight. So once the puck is formed, then I'm going to slide this down, and since this is all constricted, it should slide up there just fine. Next, make sure they get this on there as straight as possible, because this is going to be going against your bearing. I'm then going to wrap this tightly with tape, and I'm going to cut it right next to the mold there. All right, so I'm ready to mix, and this stuff is messy. Trust me on that. Wear gloves, have some protective thing down. I even put some tape on my rope to keep it from getting on there on accident. I use Defcon Home 5-minute epoxy, the clear version, which I get at Ace Hardware. But if you're getting this from Flow on Fire, they sell little epoxy kits for their push-through method for your day poi. So with 2-part epoxy, it is very, very important to have 2 equal parts in your container before you mix it. So leave your container or whatever it is up so that the air bubbles will go to the top, because otherwise if you're pushing out air bubbles on one side and not the other, then it's not going to be an even mix. So I'm going to go ahead and stick some in there. You don't really need a whole lot for this at all. And now, mixing is really, really important to get this done properly. Normally, I wouldn't do it in a dish container like this. I would like to have something that I can scrape the sides on and make sure that I'm scraping the bottom all as good as I could. Now, don't use a container that has little like dips in it or ridges in it or whatever that will keep some epoxy below your mixing device, because otherwise it won't mix evenly, and then you'll get like, sticky, non-curable epoxy. So I mix that up a couple times, make sure to wipe it off the stick, and then do it again. Really mix it good. And then start applying. At first, don't worry about getting around the edges, but that is important to do. First, get the top covered, and then have a toothpick nearby. and you're going to stab it over and over and over. And what you're doing is you're driving that epoxy into the core to be able to get it to bond to the outer fibers. And this is really important, otherwise the core could slip if it wasn't bonded well enough. And then I'm going to do that again. And then just pressing like this oftentimes drives it down beside the rope. But if it's not doing that, then that's now the time to use your toothpick and kind of get inside there next to the fibers. Sometimes you can just push some back and then get some in there. And you have, as this label says, 5 minutes to work with the epoxy. So try to get it in there with some urgency, but also be careful not to slip and touch your rope or the bearing or whatever. So I'm going to keep doing this, and then I'm going to come back at the 5-minute mark to show you how to clean up uneven edges. Okay, you also need to make sure that this puck is going to sit flat on the bearing. So if you have to make any adjustments, do it now and do it very carefully, because if you press too hard and that slides off, then you have to start again from scratch, and that doesn't sound like fun to me. Okay, so the 5 minutes is up, and I need to check this, and yep, it's about not quite hard, a little bit flexible still, so now's a good time to trim this up if you need to. Again, get a fresh razor blade for this, and should cut pretty cleanly. Okay, and I am all done with that. Now, the problem is this is bunching up a little bit when I try to push this down. And if that happens to you, especially if you're using a really thick rope like I'm using on this, the best way I found to fix that is to take a piece of floss and then tie like 3 knots in it as tight as you can get it. And then hold on to one tail and start making passes all the way down as close as you can to the next one, getting it as tight as you can. Try not to let any little fibers stick out. That's going to prevent this from wanting to go down. And I didn't follow my own directions because there's some that are sticking out a little bit, but let's try this now. Now I've pulled it into place. I can take this off and then pull it again, and it should seat down on there about where it's needing to. So yeah, if you've made it this far, good job. And if not, you decided you want Flow on Fire to make you a set, then they do a great job. And if you want a discount code, it is Poi Mechanic, all one word, all capitalized. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. And if you haven't been over to my YouTube channel, it is The Poi Mechanic, and I have a lot more of these videos over there to check out. Have a good one, and I will see you next time.